Hi everyone, it's H back again. I hope you have been keeping incredibly well since I last checked in with you. So, as you know, in the previous few entries, I have been going through specific works that I have read or I'm currently reading and taking lessons really in how I can apply them to how I live, how I approach the world, and hopefully slightly closer towards the light than I am towards the dark at the end of each word, sentence, and page. And I wanted to share it with anyone who was potentially interested. But I do actually just want to look over these, and I do always look over each entry once I have made it because I am reminded of things that I should be remembering. But the brain's capacity is finite to a degree. And so it's nice to have these reminders dotted about like seeds planted and just taking hope from the ones that decide to actually blossom into something. And I've been through just a few texts so far, but the theme for this conversation is quite funny because I always try to make some links between things that I'm either like consuming and then experiences that I'm having, because it actually helps me cement that experience and helps me to cement the lesson. And sometimes it happens deliberately. If I'm, I don't know, trying to, learn about Bertrand Russell, for example, and his theories of logic around mathematics, or his philosophical views, or his, view of God and atheism, I will actively read his work or listen to his conversations and then, think through his ideas and how I would respond to the questions that he poses to either his interviewer or the audience, and think, am I valid in what I think? I'm valid in the way that, not that if it's right or wrong or true or false, but, where are my beliefs coming from? And if it's a belief, maybe it's intangible and it comes from kind of gut feel or something esoteric. But if these are values I'm actually living by day to day, there must be a feedback loop, right? That if I'm believing something or I'm doing certain things, something must happen, and either it works well for me or it doesn't work well for me. And how does that actually sync up to my broad life views or morals or religious beliefs, whatever they may be? So sometimes it's really direct. So I'm trying to learn something through lessons and then apply it either through active thinking or experimenting or putting myself in certain situations. And then the other side of this life lessons through reading and being an autodidact is when the universe just has a big fat arrow just pointing at you with a big smiley face on the other side of you, and the lesson is just learned through sheer serendipity and dumb luck. And the entry this time is literally the dumb luck category. And I'm still smiling about it, and I hope I recall this for a long time going forward. The writer this week that I'm discussing is Kenko, and he is a 14th century, or was rather, a 14th century Japanese writer, a monk. And he used to be a courtier, decided court life was no longer for him, but still enjoyed viewing the pursuits of the everyday man and woman and considering certain moments through someone's eyes who now no longer was attached to these things, who didn't really covet items, who had decided to regulate their emotions, who had decided that this act of constantly being and doing was a pace of being and existence which was not sustainable for him. And Kenko has a series of musings in the tradition that I quite like, is where you have certain moments or experiences and they just make you consider what's going on about you. And he goes through these little themes and writes them all down. And the myth is that he wrote these small essays, or it can be a few paragraphs at a time, to be honest, and pasted them in this sort of beautiful calligraphy on the walls of his home. And after he passed away, a good friend of his went to his home, saw these writings, extracted them down, and essentially put them into, a formal book. Whether this is true or not, who knows? The story is wonderful, but we still have his writings. Now, I have been reading Kenko's work pretty much most mornings. I try to take about 5 to 10 minutes first thing because I want to get some reading under my belt. I want to have my brain sort of perambulate the themes that he goes on about throughout the day. I want it to bleed into my consciousness, and so it's like taking a kind of medicine, really. It's like you take it at the beginning, and then over time the effects will be felt. And I feel that about the written word anyway. It's a kind of salve and a balm. And sometimes it stings because it gets the spot that needs it the most, but it's painful still. And Kenko's been going on for me about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. And it's actually a really short version of Kenko's collected essays, but I'm reading them slower, thinking them over, getting through the vocabulary, learning new things really, really deliberately instead of my normal fast pace just to get the story down. And I had read this specific section, and it comes under Thought Impressions. I'm not sure if this is a title that Kenko gave it or if just the editor of the text has. And then it made me laugh to recall this based on a later experience, which I will come to explain. So first thing first is I'm going to read this passage. Maybe it takes me a minute, and then I'm going to let you know why this is so funny and peculiar in many ways. Let me begin. Are we only to look at flowers in full bloom, at the moon when it is clear? No, to look out on the rain and long for the moon, to draw the blinds and not to be aware of the passing of the spring. These arouse even deeper feelings. There is much to be seen in young boughs about to flower, in gardens strewn with withered blossom. Men are wont to regret that the moon has waned or that the blossoms have fallen. And this must be so. But they must be perverse indeed who will say, this branch, that bough is withered, now there is nothing to see. In all things it is the beginning and end that are interesting. The love of men and women, is it only when they meet face to face? To feel sorrow at an unaccomplished meeting, to grieve over empty vows, to spend the long night sleepless and alone, to yearn for distant skies. In a neglected house to think fondly of the past. This is what love is. Rather than to see the moon shining over thousands of miles, it sinks deeper into the heart to watch it when at last it appears toward the dawn. It never moves one so much as when seen in gaps between the trees, pale green over the tops of the cedars on distant hills, or behind the clustering clouds after showers of rain. When it shines bright on the leaves of oak and evergreen, and they look wet, the sight sinks deeply into one's feeling, and one feels, oh, for a friend with whom to share this, and longs for the capital. And must we always look upon the moon and the blossoms with the eye alone? No, in the very thought of it, in the spring, though we do not go abroad, on moonlit nights, though we keep to our room, there is great comfort and delight. That's not the entire passage, but that is that section. And this is Kenko deliberating on the beauty of this instance, the natural world, but any type of beauty when we think things are only best seen at exact moments or specific moments. Is an artist who paints a canvas only worthy of attention once that work is totally complete and finished and can be bought by somebody? Is there some beauty in the process and the colours coming together and being mixed and blended? With the moon here, just because it is not fulsome and bright and it's waning, perhaps it's a crescent, the thinnest, crisp outer edge of the moon is left as it continues on its cycle. Should we refuse to see it? Do we consider it as ugly, somehow incomplete? If spring is yet to come, do we look upon the trees that wait to bloom again as worthless somehow, as waiting to be seen and almost naked and not worth the time to consider? This is what Kenko touches upon here, talking of the blossoms and the moon. And I do concur, really, because one thing that I do really love to look at is the night sky. Every single night, wherever I am, whether I'm in the city and it is bright, you can still glean some stars the hardest you look. Whether I'm at home at my parents' and it's clearer there with less pollution from the lights that we have on the ground. but I will always look out for the moon and the stars. And there is something so beautiful in just seeing just one, seeing just a blanket of black and darkness, to see the moon in its various shapes as it takes on the night sky, because it just touches me deeply. There's a certain poetry and a beauty that I really appreciate. But why I mentioned this work and why I wanted to record it for my video diary is that just earlier this week I had been pursuing the red moon, the blood moon, which was visible in the northern hemisphere, essentially a lunar eclipse, and a point at which the moon would be closest to the Earth in its latest orbit, and so would appear even bigger than one would usually see. And I obviously am avidly interested in astronomy as well as just looking at the night sky, and so I had planned it that I would wake up at 5 in the morning and go in pursuit of this wonderful phenomenon. And I knew that the time would be between sort of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m, but roughly 5 a.m. was the sweet spot I had read. And so alarm was set, I woke up, energized, no snooze, no desire to stay in bed. I had dressed quickly, decided to go on foot, looking for the moon. And I thought I would be able to see it just from a clearing. It would be high enough in the sky for me to make out. I walked along a bit, I could see a red hue, but then again most of the sky was red, I can see it. And then I did a sort of turn around my block, came back, got into my car, and thought, okay, let me pursue it more formally. May I have to go further? Didn't want to miss it as it crept along its journey. I have an app on my phone which helps plot the night sky for me, and will also show me where various planets are. Obviously the moon is shown too, and so tracking this, pulling to one side, waiting at traffic lights, looking to see where it was, using my naked eye. I'm winnowing around these London side streets and hardly anyone is awake, and it feels as if it were the middle of the night. It's so dark yet. A few early risers off to work, and I cannot find it. Either the buildings are getting in the way, the clouds are definitely in the way. I even attempt to leave London on a flyover just to get that perspective as well. But this is quite far into my pursuit, and alas, I decide no more for me. This red sky, the suggestion that it was there was enough and will be enough for now. And I will have to wait 2 years, and 2 years will be fine. And I came back. I just did feel energized still because I had started my day. It had been a peaceful part of the day, and the rest of the day was quite wonderful. I did some interesting, new, exciting things as well as contributed to my work. But it was funny timing because just the following day I have this piece of writing from Kenko, and it makes me feel foolish and makes me laugh because it's exactly what he is saying. I was seeking this one great awe-inspiring moment of seeing this great blood moon when I'm typically in awe of the moon any time of the year. And even if I do not see the moon and it's just a crescent or it's just not in my visible eye line wherever I am that night, I still cherish the fact that it's there, that I'm on a planet, that we exist in this vast thing called space. But for that Monday, I just exalted this experience so highly, and I didn't get to it. And I did find some beauty and meaning in it still. But it was a wonderful lesson again, just to keep to the poetry that you find every single day, and the moments that you find as they are. And yes, there will be moments which flare up like these wonderful fireworks, roaring into the sky. These moments you'll really remember. But you do not get this as often as the regular moments, these sort of strewn gems that are just along your way. And so I had to record this somehow, this strange circling of my actual day-to-day experience and the thing I was reading, and just to remember this lesson of the everyday and the celebration of those things that we find that perhaps might seem a bit mundane, that might seem just ordinary somehow. And yes, I will relish this memory of me scouring London streets quite alone in pursuit of this moon, and nature having the last laugh on me and over me. And so as you consider and go out into the world and spot things that catch your attention, maybe just look a bit closer, because sometimes you too might be looking for this wonderful occurrence, but those occurrences are really there for one to observe if we look closely enough. I'd rather have a steady state of quiet content without that up and down moment of the once a year fireworks. Not to say I won't keep looking out for the fireworks.